Hey there, my name is Brandon Toombs and I'm an Employee Central Consultant. This is part 2 in our video series on Integration Center. In part 1, we kind of went over Integration Center as far as where it is, where we position it kind of in the overall scheme of integration options for Employee Central. Today is part 2, and in today's session, we're going to kind of go through Integration Center, kind of put it through its paces. Today, we're going to be spending a good bit of time. This video is a little bit longer. It's about 30 minutes. So if you make it through, feel free to give yourself a high five. Okay, so welcome to part 2 of the series on Integration Center. In today's session, we're going to dive in a little deeper. Last time we went through an overview to talk about the why of Integration Center and a little bit about how you can download templates and things like that. But today's session, we're going to get into the system and kind of work through the core of how Integration Center works. So there are you go through a wizard when you're setting up a new integration, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to choose an integration type, and for the most part what we will want to use for Integration Center is going to be scheduled simple file output integration. So this just basically produces a flat file that you can send off typically to an SFTP, and then the vendor would be able to receive it. Now there are other types that you can do. You can do EDI, stacked file, you can do XML, and then there's some others as well. But for the most part, when you start getting into those other types, you're probably looking at maybe moving into a CPI. During this series of videos, we're really going to focus in on the scheduled simple file output integration, because that's the most common use case for using with Integration Center. Okay, so this is probably the most important slide in today's session, or pretty much the most important information to get from today's session, and that is choosing a starting entity. So starting entity really says where are we going? Where do we start this whole process? And why that is important is because depending on which one of these starting entities you use, the system is able to determine the type of data that you want to pull. And the most commonly used types of starting entities, let me talk about each of these and when you might use them. So the first one is per person. So that is a really simple one that it's really the core of it is biographical information, and so this just really means it's going to pull whatever the most current data is across the system as of that certain day. So that's what per person is, and so we use that most often if it's just we need current data and we just need full snapshots of it. So that's really the most well, I don't want to say the most common. I think the most common is the number 3 one, which is, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now, which is imp job. So imp job is really where it starts with is job information. So it uses it as the core, and it kind of expands out from there. And this is the one that is used really for any kind of Delta-based interface that is based off of job information. So any kind of information that is based off of changes to the employee's employment data, such as jobs, pay rates, things like that, we're going to use imp job for that. So this is like a new hire interface or something like that. That would be an imp job one. So then you have per personal, which is kind of the same concept, but it would be just more for personal data deltas. So you might use that for some of your benefits deltas, things like that. And then of course there's user-based interfaces. So that's really more for LMS. But like I said, I would use this kind of this most commonly used as kind of a starting point and a guide, and really start, for example, if you're doing something for a payroll interface, really start with imp job in most cases, and then move on to a different type if you have to, but really try to do some research. There's some things online not in LMS, but in Launchpad that will help you guide you to the right starting entity. But like I said, for the most part, it's going to be one of these 4. Okay, so now with enough PowerPoints, we are going to move in and we're going to look at creating a simple interface, and this will allow us to kind of see the capabilities of Integration Center, at least the basics of it. We'll have additional videos where we're going to talk more about some of the other aspects of it, but today we're going to talk about how you can set up the starting entity, start grabbing a bunch of fields and seeing the output right away. So all right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into Integration Center. And so I just type in integration. That takes me to Integration Center. You will see here that on this main screen, we have My Integrations, we have the Data Model Navigator, we have Monitor Integrations, and we have Security Center. So we are going to be setting up a new integration. So we're going to go into My Integrations. You can see here any integrations that already exist will be displayed here. The catalog is where we can go to see some of the pre-built integrations that I talked about in video 1 on this series, but we're just going to create a new one. So I'm going to click on Create New. Again, scheduled simple file output is going to be the most common type of output for our Integration Center integrations. So, and then, as I said, this is really the most important piece for Employee Central integrations. And I'm just going to choose per person because this one's the most simple and straightforward, best probably for illustration purposes. But as I said, if I wanted to, I could go to imp job. And that is the one as well that you use often for your deltas that that start with your job information. So, but I'm just going to choose biographical information per person. All right, so once I choose it, you can see here it gives me a data preview, and it asks me what fields I want to include. And it really starts, this one, there aren't a whole lot of checkboxes that you can choose here, but if your starting entity has a lot of fields on it that you're going to be utilizing, then you would be able to check it from here. As you'll see, this is just the step 1. The next step is we're going to be able to add additional fields. So from here, I'm going to choose first date of birth. Because that's going to be one of the fields that we're going to send. So I'm just going to, as part of this example, I'm just going to try to come up with a smattering of the types of fields that you might have in a basic interface that you're sending off to some sort of vendor. So I'm just going to probably randomly pick a few of the most common fields. So one of the fields will be date of birth. I'm going to go ahead and choose that. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose navigations. And so what is this? Well, navigations is really, it just kind of alerts SuccessFactors to what type of navigation paths you're going to be using as part of the Integration Center. So without getting into too much obscure detail, I would normally choose the employment nav and probably the personal information nav just to make sure that those are selected. And the reason is, well, I'll get into the reason here in a second because I don't want to bog you down too much, but really just think about that these are just try to identify what are the most common navigation points and go ahead and select them here. So that is that gets me from the data to the gets me from the simple view to now we're almost ready to get to the data view. But first we're going to we're going to see the name. We'll identify the name. We can identify the output type. You can see here these are the different types that we have. We have CSV, true CSV, simple delimited, and simple fixed width. Which of course those are some of the most common things that you're going to be needing to send to vendors. Header type, so you can see here there's a simple header and then there's an advanced header. Then the same thing for the simple there's an advanced footer. And of course for a simple header, all that is, it's going to just have one line across there that's going to have exactly the field headings. Advanced, we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to more of the advanced topics. But I'll just for fun, I'll just put in a simple header on. All right, and so we're in good shape, and now I'm going to move on. So, and I could have I should have given it a different name, but for our purposes, just know that if you needed to change the name, you can absolutely do that. Okay, so from here, you can see that I have a few fields already identified. The first one is the person ID. Date of birth, you can see here that it has been already added, but it's in a weird format that most providers aren't going to use. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how I can go in and I can use more field options, and I can change the format here to one. I've got several different options here, but I can choose, let's just choose this one. And so you can see here, this is a more accurate interface format for a lot of vendors. So that's that. All right, so you can see here that I have person ID, external employment details, user ID, employment details, and person ID, personal information. Well, why are these fields here? Well, they are here because I chose the navigation check boxes for each of these from the prior screen. So these fields we're actually not going to need. So I can go ahead and delete them off, and I'll explain why I had to add them in here in a second. But I'm just going to right click on it, and I'm going to remove these fields. Okay, so all right, so I have removed those fields because I don't need them. I already have the person ID. But why did I have to add the navigation in the first place? Well, what this allows us to do is if there are multiple navigation paths to get to a certain value, such as supervisor, there are some weird ways that SuccessFactors is going to assume that you want that data. So by going ahead and designating the employment and personal information up front, it will kind of make sure that SuccessFactors just kind of sticks with the most standard, simple navigation path to get where it needs to go. And just leave it at that. Just if you can just take this step, trust me, it'll save you some time. I'm going to get rid of this as well because I don't need it. All right, so now I've just got person ID and date of birth. So that's a start for me. But I also now, let's go ahead and add in some of the personal information that this employee is going to have. So I'm going to click on this add, and then I can add field. I can add different types of fields. We'll talk about several of them in more detail later. But for now, let's just do add field. So I'm going to add field, and you can see from here that I can search for a field. So just to show you how this would work, I can go to I can just type last name, and eventually it's going to come back with a value for me. There we are. So you can see here, but this has got a lot of different last names. Now I can go down through here and I can probably guess or get to the right a last name field eventually, because all I have to do is look in and find the right structure. So here is probably the one I need, which is last name and personal information. But I have another way of getting to the same thing, and so I'm going to show that now, and that is I can use the entity tree. So this is where your knowledge of how the navigation works or the data model works within SuccessFactors comes into play. So I'm at biographical information, and if I know the way that biographical relates to personal information, I know that there is a direct relationship. So I will scroll down here. The way that the entity tree is set up, the first thing, the fields that show up first are going to be the fields that are actually data that is fields on that specific portlet. So in this case, biographical information, there are very few fields that we have. We have date of birth is one field that's on biographical information, and in this particular system, we don't have a whole lot else. So that's why there's very little data in this tree view itself because of the fields. The rest of this down below, though, once you get through the fields on a specific portlet, then you start getting to the navigation. So this is how I can navigate from the entity that I'm on to other entities. So you can see here there is a navigation from from the entity, from biographical information, for example, to emails. So these are different email navigations. I have emergency contact navigations, employment navigations, which we will get into in a minute, because those are going to be really important, because that's how we get to some of the employment information. But we are going to care right now about personal information. So this is, I scrolled past it, but you can see here it is. And so I'm going to go to personal information navigation. And again, this is all, so again, to just kind of restate this to make sure it's clear. First things that show up are the fields that are in that portlet, but then you go to navigations, and the navigations are in alphabetical order. So if you know the name of the navigation you want, you can kind of scroll down and get where you need to go. So again, I'm in personal information nav, and then from here you can see now I can get to all the fields that are on the personal information portlet. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select some of the fields that I need. Now, in order to speed this process along, you can actually click this little checkbox here called Add Another. And what this does is it says, once I push the Add Association Selected field, instead of it just adding that one field and you start over and then you're still navigating, then you have to re-navigate wherever you're going. If you, let's say you need 4 or 5 fields from the same part of the system, you can click on this Add Another, and it's just basically going to let you keep where you're at and just keep adding fields. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to select first name, and then I'm going to click Add Association First Name. So you're going to see this pop-up that shows up, and it says you have not used a filter. So I am going to claim some ignorance here. Not claim it. I'm going to definitely say some ignorance here, because I've actually tried to understand this specific type of filtering is basically saying that biographical information is not effective dated, but personal information is effective dated. So therefore, it's trying to decide which of the fields you want in case there are multiple records that are valid. But what happens is, in reality, based on my testing, it's always going to choose whatever value is effective as of the reporting date. And of course, on personal information, there's only going to be at any given period of time one record that is going to be effective as of that effective date. So this filter selection is really not that important. Now, there are probably some cases where this may be not the case, but for the most part, what I do is I just click the yes and just select the field and go on. And I haven't really run into too many problems yet. So again, I'm just going to select the first name. Now I'm going to, let's just say that I'm going to come back to gender here in a second. I'm going to say I need the last name. Okay, so I'm going to select that again. So now first name and last name have been selected. In marital status, I'm going to also choose here in a second, but I'm also going to choose this field data preview. You can see here on the side, you can kind of see this is a cool thing because it can kind of show you what some of the values are that would be presented based on what you've chosen. So you can see I've chosen last name, and so I've added that in. I'm going to use middle name because I need that as well. Oh, nope. I actually have to push the middle name, and now I just add middle name. So I've added in middle name. And let's see here. And then now I'm going to choose, I need to add marital status as well, but I'm going to click on this. And you're going to see here in my field data preview, that does not look like marital status. This looks like a bunch of numbers. Well, the reason for that is this view right here is technically pulling the exact data from that structure. And that structure, marital status, is their option ID. So all pick lists behind the scenes actually have an option ID in the system, and that's what this number is. And so of course, that's not going to be meaningful to the vendor. So I need to actually navigate to the marital status itself. So again, I can navigate to the pick lists. So again, just like here, like I mentioned on biographical information, where you have all of the fields first, then the navigations, same thing happens here. And even for a pick list, that's what we have. So I'm going to scroll down, and we are going to get to marital status nav, and this gets me to the marital status pick list option. And so this allows me to actually pull the data from the pick list itself. So it's a little bit tricky to get to the actual pick list label. This locale label does not typically work right, and so you actually have to go to this pick list labels section in order to get the value that you truly want. So this is where you will check the label. And so the field data preview here, and I know this looks kind of weird. This actually shows the entirety of all the pick lists, so that's why the preview doesn't look exactly right. Still, just to recap what you have to do in order to get to a pick list label, you're going to go into the navigation for the pick list. Then you're going to, from the pick list option, you're going to choose pick list labels. And then you're going to be able, if you go into the label from here, now I've been able to add the label. So I'm going to click on that, click yes. And then I am good there. So now I'm going to also add in the gender. Let's see what the gender looks like. And this is male, female. And of course, this may be, if you need that spelled out, we can show how that can be added. But a lot of vendors, this is actually what they're going to want. So I'm just going to click add gender. So I've added that in. And so now I have added in several fields from personal information. And so I'm going to go back to the preview, and you can see that those fields have been added. So I've got several fields that have been added. And you can see I can scroll down. So the way that this works, it just pulls the first 50 fields or so for preview. So I can just look at the data and just make sure that it's kind of producing what I was expecting it to produce. So that's a very handy tool. The other thing that's really cool is I can click save, I can download preview. So download preview means I can get a little bit more expansive view of the data. Again, this is not the entire set of records. It will only show me the first 25 records. So this is not going to give you everything that would be produced. The only way you can do that is by running the interface and have it send to where it's supposed to go via SFTP. But if I want to just see what the data looks like a little bit more of it, then that's what this preview is for. All right, so now I've added some fields in from there. I'm going to further go, and I'm going to add some fields from job information. So I am going to navigate again. This time I'm going to go to job information. So the way to get to job information, again, this is where your knowledge of the data model is going to come into play. But you're going to go to, first you need to go to when you go from biographical, you need to go to employment details. Then go to job information, because there's no direct line from biographical information to job information. But all I have to do is I go to employment details. So I will select on employment details, and then I would navigate from here to job information. So again, from employment nav, and actually from here I will add a few more fields while I'm here. So I'm going to select my hire date. Or I will add my original start date. And then I'm also going to add in my my hire date, which is the last hire date. I'll add that one as well. And so you can see that I've been able to add a couple of fields from employment details. Now I'm going to scroll in, and I'm going to get to job information, if I can find it. So again, you have to scroll down alphabetically. You can see there's a lot of things that I'm going to navigate through in order to get where I need to go. And let's see, where did I? Sometimes there's a little bit of hunting around to try to find the right thing anyway. Yeah, So I went too far, and so I need to go to imp job. Let me find it. Job relationship. Oh, there it is. It's at the very bottom. So again, just keep scrolling till you get to what you need. Again, there's a little bit of trial and error and learning how to get places, but this is the process you're going to go through. You're just going to navigate from biographical, in this case, to employment details, and then to job information. So now I've got job information, and from here I will select the values that I need. So I'm going to select business unit. And you will see here that, again, this is going to give me the IDs, which maybe in this interface, that's all I need is the IDs. So I'll add that in. And now I'm going to add company. And cost center. And then let's see, I'm going to add in department. And I'm going to add in employee class. But as you'll see, this is another one of those where it's actually a pick list. So I'll come back to that one. And let's see if there's any others. I'm going to also add location. But it's this one this one I could send the ID, but let's just say for the sake of argument that that this interface actually needed the label for the location. So I'm going to show how to get to that. And then the supervisor, there's the manager ID. I'm going to add that in. Okay, so I'm going to come back now, and I'm going to select I'm going to add the employee class and the location, but those are not. I need not the item that's stored on job information, which is going to be the ID. I actually need I need to navigate to the actual object itself so that I can get the information. So first thing I'm going to get is the employee class, if I can find it. Employee class. So I'll go to pick list option, scroll down here, pick list labels, and I will add that in. Now, if for some reason I needed the external code from a pick list, I could add that as well. So it's not that you just have to get to the label. You could also get to the external code of the pick list if you ever needed to. All right, next I'm going to get to the location. So location nav, and then this is not a pick list. This is a foundation object. So it's a little bit different in how this works. So I would go in here, and then I would select the location nav, and then from here I would just find whatever it is I'm looking for. In this case, it would be the name, and so I'm going to add that association as well. Okay, so I have added in a few fields now from the job information. Now let's go back and let's look at our results. So you can see here that I've added in original start date. I'm going to go back into more field options, and I'm just going to change the format to the format that our vendor wants. Same thing for this one. And then you can see the rest of these fields have been added in as well. So, okay, so you can see here that's the basics of how I can go about selecting the fields, how I can choose my starting entity, and then this is how I can get the information. Now, there's a lot more that we're going to need to go into. The next video, we're going to talk about the scheduling aspect of this and how that works, and also the filtering. We're going to look at filtering and scheduling next. And then the last one is where we're going to get into other types of fields rather than just pulling the data. What if we need to manipulate a little bit? So that'll be the very last video that we're going to go through. So that's it for this one, though. We'll stop here and we'll pick it up with scheduling and filtering in the next video.